I had an encounter in December of last year that left me feeling very unsettled. I was in a vulnerable position, as my partner and I, both female and homeless, had just purchased an RV to live in, but were having trouble finding a spot to rent because it was an older model and we had pets. We had parked in the farthest corner of the Walmart parking lot in Bend, Oregon at around 10 a.m. one day. My partner had errands that needed to be ran and took a bus to do such, as I held down the fort and watched the dogs. It was going to be a long day of waiting around for her to get back so we could leave. I went into the store twice to make some purchases early in the day. I worked on some maintenance and art before getting bored enough to take a nap. As I was taking the dogs outside beforehand, 2 police officer vehicles pulled up and parked right next to the RV. At this point, I'm preparing for them to ask me to move the vehicle or tell me I can't park overnight or something. After a while of nothing, though, I fell asleep anyway. When I woke up, I could tell it was getting closer toward the evening. The sun was still very much up, and considering the police presence, I wasn't particularly in the mindset of anything bad happening. Still, I always carry my pepper spray on me. My partner was still not back yet, although I expected her late. She had our only phone, so I went into the store to check the time. The officers had moved already at this point, and the parking area in general was pretty barren, save for one van parked in the spot right behind the RV. I entered the store and went to the restroom in the front. Then I walked to the electronics department to see what time it was on the displays. It was a few minutes before 6 p.m. I left after only having been there a few minutes. As I was walking out the door, the crowd in front of me slowly dispersed to veer toward their respective vehicles. I continued walking behind one man, who had seemingly parked in the same direction as me. He was tall, thin, and scraggly, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a black hoodie. I walked maybe 30 feet behind him the whole way. As he passed all the cars by the front of the store, I came to the conclusion that he must be the owner of the van by my RV. He walked with clear direction, not looking around for where his car was or anything. After passing the main crowd of the parking lot, I got my pepper spray out of my pocket and held it in hand as a routine safety measure. The man walked between the back of the RV and the driver's side door of the van. I figured he was about to get in, but instead he lingered. I stopped walking that direction and started heading toward a more populated parking area at the next store across the street, since it was closer than Walmart from this end. Then he looked at me, and we made eye contact for about a minute. It felt as if he recognized me, as if he'd been staking me out and was surprised to see me leaving the store so soon. I continued to walk away while staring at him, and he watched me before slipping around the side of my RV, where there were some bushes and a fence with no outlet. I was noping out at this point, so I go into the other store and walk around blankly, staring at things for a bit, trying to formulate a plan. It's pretty busy in there with no one at the customer service desk, so I go into the gas station next door and ask to use the phone. I call my partner to explain the situation and tell her not to go directly to the RV. Then I headed back into Walmart, got a coffee at the McDonald's inside, and waited out for another hour until she was able to return. Perhaps I should have called the police, as I was worried about my animals. My little dog would bark, but they're not exactly guard dogs, and our possessions being stolen. But I had recently called 911 while witnessing domestic violence a few days prior, only to have them take 2 hours to show up in the middle of downtown. I was worried they would not only not help, but possibly harass me for parking there. I don't have a driver's license, so having to move the RV before my partner returned would be a dangerous situation. Once she arrived, we went back to the RV together. The van was gone. Nothing was touched, despite one of the windows not locking properly, but the pets were extremely spooked. Maybe they had decided against stealing after I caught them. I'm not well off, and honestly, one look at that beat-up old thing would tell you I don't have much worth taking. Honestly though, from the look in that guy's eyes, I feel like he wasn't after material possessions. I'm happy that I never have to find out for sure. I've reached out to the mods with evidence to verify this story. I just have to send them this link after posting, so it may take a little bit of time to get it verified. I'm noting this because I know this story sounds completely ridiculous, but the girl I experienced this with is actually insane. A lot of people may have heard about this girl. She was all over the news after she stalked a guy, bombarded him with 65,000 texts, and broke into his house all over one date. We met shortly after she went on that date with him, and we were friends for a while before she broke into his house. At first, she seemed like a nice, albeit somewhat quirky, person. I met her when I spent a couple of months visiting the west coast of the US in the summer of 2017. I thought she was cute, and we spent a lot of time together. We were living next door to each other for a few weeks, and we were never really more than friends. I stopped having any sort of non-platonic feelings after she started to talk a lot about a guy she had met on some dating website. Apparently, he was her soulmate, and she had somehow been guided to him by following her birth calendar. I would only later come to know that they had only been on one date, and he had never spoken to her again. I thought that was weird, but I enjoyed our conversations for the most part, and she was funny and nice, so we remained friends. Eventually, she moved on to short flings with a guy and then another girl from Tinder, all the while still talking to me about this guy that she was going to marry, saying that she liked how jealous he got when she would tell him about hooking up with other people. A couple of weeks later, she started to get really erratic. I confronted her a few times about how she was acting, and she told me that she had recently stopped taking her meds, but would start taking them again. She came home one day and decided to tell me that she had a court date coming up for a DUI. I have no idea if this is actually true, but if there's a way to find that out, it happened in Arizona and her name is pretty easy to find. Someone could look it up if they wanted to know, I guess. Her plan was actually to leave the country and go to South America. I told her what a dumb idea that was, and even though she actually went all the way to the airport in a different city, she wound up coming back. Apparently, her soulmate was no longer answering her texts, and she took that as a sign she should drag her ass back to where he was and fix their relationship. She was upset that he may be seeing other people, even though it seemed okay to her that she was doing the same thing. Later on, she told me she had texted him and said if he blocked her, she would know that meant he wanted her to come find him. Obviously, he blocked her. Obviously, that didn't go over well with her. So she moved a couple of days later, and the summer was ending, and I moved back to the East Coast. I didn't hear from her for a little while, but then we started talking again through text and WhatsApp. She generally seemed like she was doing better. She told me she had found a roommate and was working on her art again and just generally seemed like she was in a better place. I was happy to have my friend back and healthy, but that didn't last longer than a couple of months. Eventually her behavior started to become erratic again. She was sending dozens of texts at a time, and they were all over the place. Several of them had to do with her soulmate and how she was still following him even though he had called the police and blocked her. I told her to stop, tried to get her to take her meds. I tried to reason with her different ways 100 times. I was on the opposite side of the country, and I had no way of getting in touch with her family, who I never knew much about, or her friends to try and get them to help her. She was a kind person, and a good friend when she was taking care of her mental health, and I cared about her, but I couldn't force her to take care of herself. One day, I set aside some time to call her, and I told her that she was overwhelming me and that she really needed to reach out to her family or someone who could help her. She told me I couldn't do that because she needed to stay with me or she would have to go back to her ex-husband. I don't think any of this is true, but she thought her ex-husband was going to have her killed or followed, that he had the entire police force in his pocket, that he had paid off her family to give him intel on her whereabouts and what was going on in her life. I had just moved for a job, and I lived in a small studio in a big city. I had no room for anyone to stay long term, and I wasn't about to do that anyways, and she was starting to scare me at this point. She asked if I was still living at this address, which really freaked me out, because I had never given her my address in the first place, or put it anywhere online. She wouldn't tell me how she got it. I asked her to leave me alone, and told her we couldn't be friends anymore unless she took some steps to get better. Obviously, she didn't take this well. Though I hated my tiny, cramped apartment, the reason I was drawn to it was because it had great security. It was actually on the upper floors of a hotel, although the hotel rooms were much nicer than the residence, and no one was allowed through the residence elevators unless the resident had given their name to security ahead of time, and the guest had to show ID. After what happened next, I loved my cramped little apartment because the staff kept me safe. It had been over a week since I had talked to her because I blocked her number and blocked her on WhatsApp. She tried texting me from 4 different phone numbers, but I just blocked them all and never responded. I was walking home from work one day, and I was sure I saw her across the street from my building. It was storming out, and I didn't get a good view. I rushed upstairs and calmed myself down in my apartment. Maybe I was just being paranoid. It's a big city. Lots of people have brown hair and glasses. I was just worried about her. But then the phone rang. The desk was calling to see if I had forgotten to let them know I had a visitor. My heart sank. I asked them who was waiting. They said they tried asking for her name or ID, but she just walked out right away. I knew it was her from the way they described her. I texted a mutual friend from over the summer. I wasn't really close with him, so we hadn't stayed in touch, but he told me she had lost it and that he had blocked her too. Apparently, she had gone back on the dating site she met her soulmate on and found someone who looked just like him in my city. She was convinced it was him and had come here to find him. This was a very touristy city, but there was just no way this guy had coincidentally come out here. I was sure she had gone bonkers, and I knew she was well aware of where that guy actually lived. I took the page out of her book and used a text-free number to text her that she should leave me alone and I would call the cops if she ever came near my building or me again. In retrospect, I shouldn't have contacted her at all, but I was emotional and not using my better judgment. She said she just wanted to know if I could help her find something. Texted back really fast and didn't even try to hide it. Then I deleted the app so she couldn't reach me again. I lived in a very crowded area, and I knew she couldn't get into my building, but I was still scared whenever I had to take public transit alone at night, was walking through less crowded areas to get home. I had a friend who used to work for the police, not in this city or at the time this all happened, and she would drive or walk me home from work whenever she could for a while. She told me I should go ahead and report it, even though they couldn't really do anything since she hadn't hurt me and nothing had really happened. I was embarrassed and again didn't use my better judgment. I felt like it was my fault for engaging with her for so long. I knew she was mentally unstable, and I would still try to be her friend and help her. Maybe I gave her the wrong idea that I could do more for her. I ended up moving to a new city for another job after that, and I didn't hear from her again. I later found out the reason why was that a couple months later she had once again gone back to Arizona and had been arrested for breaking into her soulmate's house and using his bathtub. They found a large knife in her car. I didn't want to go into too much detail about her stalking of that guy and what she said about him in our text because I wanted to try and focus on my personal experience instead of just her with his. I could answer some questions in the comments if anyone has any though, I suppose. My first post in Let's Not Meet, so this happened over a year ago. Our oldest son Caden was 3 at the time, and our youngest son Connor was around 5 months old. It still gives me chills. It still makes me uncomfortable even walking by. It was a January evening in Pennsylvania. It was dark outside with a couple of inches of snow on the ground. We had just finished eating dinner, and I planned on giving our little one a bath. My husband drives a truck for work, so he isn't home very often. It's just me and the boys during the week. Caden was playing in his toy room that has a door leading to the side deck. A little detail. We have no sensor light or even a porch light on that whole side of the house. At this time, we didn't use the deck at all, only using our grill during the summer months. It's not even close to the sidewalk or the next street over. Basically an open space of yard off that deck. Anyway, Caden was playing in the toy room, waiting for his turn to take a bath while I brought Connor into the bathroom. We were just about done with bath time when I hear Caden's little feet running toward the bathroom. He stands in the doorway and says, "Mommy, there's a man looking in the side door. I think it's the mailman." My heart skipped a beat. No way was the mailman coming at 7 p.m., and the side door, as he called it, was basically never used, especially not in the winter. I didn't even hear anyone knock. I began to sketch myself out more by thinking about how there was no light on the deck, and this person would have to walk through the yard in the snow, walk up the back stairs of the deck, and go to that door when the front porch light was on and attached to a shoveled sidewalk. I took Connor out of the bath, put him in a towel in his little chair, and told Caden to sit with his brother and not come out until I said it was okay. He was confused, but listened. He just kept asking what was wrong. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find. I had 911 ready to call and got my Mama Bear face on. When I walked to the side door, I shined the flashlight on my phone through the window of the door at a distance, walking up to it to hopefully scare someone away. It was mostly made out of glass. The worst thought with this as a mother is that as I reached for the handle, I realized that the door was unlocked. The man could have walked right in. I flung the door open, shined my light, held up my knife, and yelled, "Hey!" in the most threatening voice a 5'4", 120-pound woman could make. There were footprints in the snow up the deck stairs and back down, going into the field and the woods behind our house. I slammed the door thoroughly freaked out and locked it up tight. I called the police and waited in the bathroom with the boys. While I was in there, I asked Caden, "Do you know who the man was?" He said, "No, but he smiled and waved at me for a really long time." I asked him what the man was wearing. He told me that he had on a hat that looked like a mailman's and that he wasn't wearing a coat. That's all I managed to get out of him. The police officer came and searched the property with flashlights before finally coming inside. He asked me and Caden some questions and then informed me that he not only saw footprints leading up to the side deck, but also to the outside door to our basement and kitchen window on the other side of the house as well. He suggested that I have someone come and stay with us for the night, and they would continue to follow the footprints that were left in the snow back to the field and wood line. My father-in-law slept on the couch that night with his gun. Being the closest relative to our house, my mother was a nervous wreck, and I got very little sleep that night. I never heard back from the police. I'm guessing the tracks were lost through the bit of woods. Caden still mentions it from time to time randomly, and we got a blackout curtain for that door. I'd still very much like to get better locks just to be safe. My husband and my father think it might have been a man who saw me home alone while passing and hopefully wanted to sneak a peek. But why just stand and watch my child and go around the whole back of the house, not by the front door or street? I hope never to see that creep's face, and I hope he never smiles or waves at my child again. I also posted this in Creepy Encounters, as I wasn't sure where this fit exactly. This happened a long time ago, when I was around 15 or so. I'm 25 now. Back then, I was really into singing and dancing with my friends, and I was introduced to K-pop as a result. This was way before K-pop became noticeably mainstream, so whenever events relating to it came up, we got very excited. There was a global audition for one of the big companies in my town, and my 3 friends and I decided to go. I was the only non-Asian girl in our friend group. I'm only mentioning it because it pertains to the story later. The K-pop fandom back then was pretty much the same as it is now. People of various ethnicities were into the idol music genre. We all knew the likelihood of getting into the industry was extremely low, and for me even more so as I wasn't of Asian descent, but I knew that going in. That wasn't the point of us going, though. We just loved being in proximity of something important to the genre we enjoyed. Just some kids having fun. By the way, I looked pretty young for my age then, and wearing pigtails this day probably didn't help with that either. So we get dropped off and meet up at the audition place, a community center of some sort. We kind of dilly-dally around a bit, until we have to line up for our respective auditions. Singing, dancing, the like. I was going to go sing, so I was mentally preparing myself in the crowded space outside of the audition rooms. That's when out of the corner of my eye, I see a tall, older, 40s maybe, white man begin to approach me. I remember thinking, is he going to audition too or something? It was strange because everyone else there was younger. Maybe he was one of their parents. He walks up to me pretty close and goes, "Can you help me, please?" I'm confused and ask what he needs help with. "Oh, the staff here. My son. My son's trying to audition, but they won't let him." This was weird. When I asked him why, he said, "Because he's not Korean." This was when I started to get creeped out. I looked around to see an extremely diverse crowd, and then back at him. I don't know. That's terrible. You should talk to, and then I point towards the staff. They should be able to help. I knew he was bullshitting, but I was too scared to say anything else. He didn't listen, and continued to insist on me helping him. He then said something that sent a chill down my spine. When I was trying for the 5th time to convince him to approach the staff instead of me, he beckoned me to come outside with him. "My son's just outside in my car. Can you come talk to him, please?" That was when I repeated what I said earlier. It began to firmly walk in the opposite direction. He kept trying to coax me out to see his son. I managed to finally lose him in the crowd of people. Only seconds later, I see him talking to my friend about me and helping his son and all that. I was shocked. The man had clearly been watching me for a while to know who I came with. We had all split up by that point. I went up immediately and told her we should get going, without even looking at the man. He ignored me and kept on speaking to her. Without speaking, I went up to her, grabbed her hand and pulled her at once to get away from him. She was super gullible and didn't understand why I was so worried. The man was clearly unnerved by what I did and left my friend and disappeared into the crowd. About 20 minutes later, I'm in the lineup for the audition when I get a cold feeling all over my body. I turned to look toward the entrance, and there he was, standing. But he wasn't just standing. He had his arms crossed, and he was glaring at me. I've never seen someone look at me with such vitriol. He looked like he wanted to genuinely kill me. It was terrifying. The crowd of people was sparse because we had all lined up outside our assigned rooms. This man waited there, staring at me non-stop for an hour. An hour! He glared at me all the way until I got into the audition room. I was so scared that he'd be there once I got out, but I guess the auditions went on longer than he expected, and he went home. With his son in tow, I'm guessing. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. As always, be sure to let me know what you guys think, and please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. I know some people have also had some problems about videos not appearing in their sub box, so please make sure to hit that little bell if you guys want to always be notified of when my next video comes out. As always, links to all of my social media will be in the description of the video below. You can find links to my Twitter, Gmail, Twitch, and Facebook accounts. So if you guys ever want to talk to me, just go ahead and shoot me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond to your message as soon as possible. I'm also going to start trying to stream on Twitch a little bit more, so if you guys have notifications on there, you'll be notified right away when I go live. I might also try to do some on YouTube, but I haven't decided yet. I'm still kind of trying to decide what kind of streams I want to do. Anyways, if you guys have a story you would like to send in, or if you have a story you would like to suggest that I read, go ahead and send me a message on any of those links in the description below. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include the title, how you would like to be credited, and any genres that the story might have, if it does have one. If you guys are curious about the music used in this video, go ahead and take a look in the description below as well. I always put all of the music in the order in which it appears in the video, and I also have links to the artists as well. Last but not least, I also have a Patreon if you guys feel like you want to contribute to the channel a little bit. But of course, as always, it is never required, and you will never have to pay for watching any of my videos, so that's just something you do if you feel like it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you very much.